4. Past lives. She stared in increasing bewilderment at the two men in front of her. So far, she had discovered exactly 2 things about her surroundings. First, she was in something called a TARDIS, whatever one of those might be. Second, the man she had met was called Doctor. No, both men she had met were called Doctor. "I don't get it," she said. "How can he be you? You don't even look alike." "How many times do I have to explain?" the first of the doctors asked. "Oh yes, I forgot. You've forgotten everything, haven't you?" Shrugging, he ignored her and stared at the other man. "I'm not a human being," he said offhandedly over his shoulder. "I'm a Time Lord. We're not limited to the tiny portion of time that your lives span. When we age and tire, we change, we regenerate. And I used to look like that," he indicated the other man, "quite some time ago." The other man was standing perfectly still, the smile frozen on his cheerful face. She inched forwards, examining him. "He's not much of a talker, is he?" "I've got him on pause," the doctor told her. "Strictly speaking, he's not really here. It's a recording of some kind that I seem to have triggered." She tried to reach out and touch the eccentric figure. Her hand passed straight through it. With a jerk, she pulled back. "You mean like a tape recording?" "Something like that," the doctor said airily, "but infinitely more sophisticated. It's a temporal projection programmed into the TARDIS's telepathic circuits, and designed to manifest itself right now for some peculiar reason." "Programmed?" she repeated. "By who?" "By whom?" he corrected her absently. "By me, of course. I wonder why I did it." "Don't you know?" "Of course I don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't have to do this to jog my memory. It must be very important. I just wish I knew why." "Why not ask him?" she said, gesturing towards the frozen figure. "Presumably he'll be able to tell you." "You're always so impatient, Ace," he chided. He hated to be rushed into anything. "Ace?" she asked eagerly. "Is that my name?" "Yes." She mulled it over whilst he stared at the person he had once been. "Funny sort of name," she decided finally. "It's not your given one," he added. "But you preferred Ace to Dorothy." "I did." When he nodded, she shook her head. "I wish I knew why." "I'll see about getting your memory back in a minute." He gestured at the frozen projection of the former Doctor. "Right now I'm more concerned about him." "Thanks a lot," Ace muttered gloomily. "Oh, your time will come," he told her cryptically. Then he keyed in a sequence on the central console. The other Doctor came back to life again. "I haven't got much time," he said. "I've been in the Matrix, but I'm sure you'll remember all about that. What's vanishing fast is a piece of information I picked up there. Beware the Timewyrm." "What's a Timewyrm?" Ace asked. "It's no good asking him," the doctor told her. "He's just a trans-temporal projection. He can't see or hear us." Before she could say anything, he added, "And it's no good asking me because I haven't the foggiest notion of what I'm warning myself about." "Timewyrm," the recording repeated. "At the core of the Matrix, oldest input, from ancient Gallifrey, a sort of future myth, end of the universe, very apocalyptic. You'll have to do something about, I'm afraid. A unique creature noted for its ability to... The figure faltered and looked uncertainly at the console. "Why am I talking to myself? Leela? Where is that girl? Oh, yes." His insubstantial finger reached out to a control and vanished. "Well," Ace said after a moment, "what was all that about?" "I've no idea," replied the doctor, a worried frown creasing his features. "But it sounds important," she insisted. "It was," he agreed, "vitally. But it still doesn't make any sense to me. I've never heard of a Timewyrm." Shaking his head, he started to play with the controls. A small screen lit up with information scrolling across it. "And neither has the TARDIS," he announced finally. "But he knew about it," she objected. "Surely you know what he knows if he's how you used to be." "It's not that simple," the doctor snapped. "Life never is. Look, I, was once linked to the Matrix back on Gallifrey, and before you ask, Gallifrey is the world I come from, where the vast majority of the Time Lords live. And the Matrix is a sort of data storage bank for almost every piece of information that has existed or will exist. It scans the reaches of time and space and accumulates a vast amount of knowledge. Most of it's completely trivial and worthless, of course, but sometimes bits of it are very useful, and I must have come across a bit of it back then and needed to warn me now about it. But he seemed to forget what he was doing while he was doing it, Ace pointed out. It's a safeguard, the Doctor explained. My people, the Time Lords, don't like to interfere in the affairs of other worlds, and the Matrix gives a person access to enough information to allow someone to meddle rather effectively. So whenever anyone uses the Matrix to get any specific piece of information, anything else that they might accidentally stumble across is wiped from their minds. Me, had to enter the Matrix when Gallifrey was invaded by the Sontarans, but my memory of what I found there was completely wiped out, at least theoretically. So the warning about the Timewyrm must be pretty urgent for me to have been able to keep it in my memory long enough to get back to the TARDIS and warn myself about it. He sighed. I just wish I'd remembered enough to make it worthwhile. And what's a Leela? Ace asked. Who, not what. She was a travelling companion of mine. You didn't imagine you were the first person I ever took along with me, did you? I hardly know what to think, she snapped back. You stole my memories, remember? Of course I remember, he scowled. You're the one with the slate-clean mind, not me. Try to concentrate. This Timewyrm must be something very important. I wish I knew what I wanted me to do. Ace shrugged. You'll just have to be very careful if we run into a Timewyrm. Well, that's rather obvious, the Doctor said. I could have worked that out for myself. He stared at her and shrugged. Let's see about getting you your memory back, shall we? That would be nice, she said sarcastically. How did you manage to wipe my mind anyway? I was clearing up some of the clutter in my forebrain, he explained, hovering over the telepathic circuitry. Decisively, he stabbed at a pattern of controls. As I said, I'm a Time Lord. We live for a vast length of years by your standards, and in that time we get an attic full of useless memories. Every few thousand years we like to clean them out, so to speak, edit out what we don't need, and leave plenty of room for new stuff as we go along. And what happens to the used memories? She asked with interest. This was like nothing she'd ever heard about before, at least as far as she could recall. Do you write a book? My Lives and Times? Don't be absurd. He was trying to concentrate on his programming. The TARDIS stores the important data. The rest are wiped. Puffed. Gone. With sudden panic, she stared at the panel he was playing with. It seemed full of red lights. Her generalised knowledge told her that red lights were used as warning signs. Is that what you've done with me? She asked, gripping his arm and pointing at the console. Have you puffed me out of there? Shaking her free, he stared haughtily at her. Of course not. There's plenty of room in the TARDIS's memory banks for the contents of that small mind of yours. It's just a matter of accessing it and... Aha! Grinning in triumph, he pointed at the little screen again. Ace peered at it. Whatever language it was written in, she couldn't recall knowing it. I can't read that, she complained. Of course you can't, he agreed, infuriatingly. It's in ancient High Gallifreyan. All the best computer programs are. But that's you, right there. But I want to be me right here, she tapped the side of her head. I'm getting to that. Come over here and put both hands palm down on these two metal plates. He gestured to the base of the telepathic circuits. Warily, she held her hands almost in position. Why? She asked. She couldn't remember if she trusted him or not, and preferred to play it safe given what she knew about his actions so far. A man, a Time Lord, she corrected herself, who erased everything you ever knew purely by accident, was not someone to trust implicitly. You've got to make contact with those circuits, or I can't transfer those memories back. Well, you drained them out and I was nowhere near this panel, she objected. You were asleep, he explained with all the patience he could muster, and the telepathic matrix somehow overlapped your mind. Your defences were down and you were relaxed. Well, now your defences are up and you're very tense. So I need a good, clean contact pathway between your brain and the circuits. Do as you're told. When I get my memories back, she asked, annoyed by his attitude, do I like you? Everybody likes me, he told her. Well, almost everybody. When she gingerly placed her hands in position, he nodded and tapped in the final codes. Ace felt like she'd been kicked in the brain by a bad-tempered Cyberman. She tried to scream and draw free, but she was rooted to the spot, frozen. Through the pain she could feel her mind expanding. Memories were flooding back, she supposed, but it just felt like she was being grilled over mental coals. After an eternity, the agony was over, and she was free. With a stifled sob, she collapsed to the floor. Bit of a strain, I expect, the doctor said without any obvious sympathy. Need a rest? What I need, she told him from the floor, is a loaded submachine gun and a target painted on your back. Or a can of Nitro 9. You can have a 50-yard start. Ah, he grinned, entirely unmoved by anger. So you remember who you are now? She considered it. Reaching into her mind, she discovered that she did know. Dorothy. God, how she hated that name. And she and the doctor had taken off a while ago in the TARDIS. TARDIS, time and relative dimension in space. A sophisticated machine that looks like a dilapidated London police telephone box on the outside. Inside, its dimensions are vastly larger, and it is capable of traversing all the known boundaries of time and space by passage through the vortex. They had taken off in the TARDIS from near her home, Perivale, West London. Not much of a home. They had fought the Master, image of a sneering bearded face, elegant clothing and fangs, on the planet of the cheetah people, smell of blood, pounding of feet and the thrill of the hunter. Yes, she said, unable to conceal the smile in her voice. I'm Ace. Well, that's an improvement, he said. Climbing unsteadily to her feet, she leaned on the console for support. Doctor, how could you possibly be so stupid? She demanded wearily. What if I hadn't got my memories back? You'd have found some new ones, he told her blithely. You're young and adaptable. You what? Ace could hardly trust herself to speak. This is important, Doctor. You have to know who you really are. The doctor made no reply. A shadow crossed his face, and he looked lost and alone. Ace decided to change the subject. Well, I prefer knowing, all right. Anyway, how do I know I've got all my memories back? We'll do a spot check. Where did you first meet me? Iceworld, she said promptly. I was a waitress. Tedium City, boring job, boring people. I was dead chuffed when you turned up. A bit of excitement at last, and... She broke off. Then there's something about Fenric. He planned the whole thing. I was at school in the lab mixing up a batch of nitro, and there was this mega explosion, and I was on Iceworld. But it was Fenric who made it all happen, wasn't it? Yes, the doctor told her grimly. It was Fenric. Have you been mucking about with my mind? She asked aggressively. Changing things about in there. Did you edit out some bits of it? If I had, the doctor replied, I'd have made you a lot less rude than you are. No, you've got back whatever the TARDIS took from you. You're all you again, for better or worse. Thanks a heap, she muttered. I don't think I'll ever be able to go to sleep again in peace. I can put a few buffers into the circuits. Stop it from happening again. In fact... He broke off as a low, booming sound filled the room. After a second, it was repeated. Nothing in her memory gave any clue as to what the noise was. Ace turned to the doctor, who looked almost ashen. What was that? The cloister bell, he told her grimly. She couldn't remember any cloisters in the TARDIS. Well, why is it ringing? I don't know, he answered. It's not sounded since the Logopolis affair. When I died, the me you saw in that recording, that is. It only rings in the direst of emergencies. That wasn't exactly reassuring. Like what? Why was he always so frustratingly tight-mouthed with information that might be crucial? Oh, the end of the universe, imminent death and destruction on a colossal scale, a regeneration crisis of painful proportions, that sort of thing. Ace thought about it for a moment. Not good, clearly. But then, with the Doctor, so few things ever were. She realised that in one way, having regained her memory was not so marvellous. It made her painfully aware of all her previous adventures with this strange traveller. Then what could it be signalling now? How should I know? He examined the controls. We're still in the vortex, and there's nothing outside the ship. I don't know why it's sounding. You don't know much, and that's a fact, Ace told him in disgust. The Duchess in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, he told her after a moment's thought. I know where you stole that quotation from. An idea occurred to her. Do you think this cloister bell thingy is connected with whatever it is that you were warning yourself about a few minutes ago? Boom! The Doctor started at the sound and stared into nothingness thoughtfully. It would appear so, yes. The Timewyrm. Boom! Worried, Ace glanced around. It's responding to what we say. Of course it is, he told her. It's the TARDIS trying to communicate with us. Can't it do better than this? Or are we expected to play 20 questions to find out what the problem is? The Doctor glared impatiently at her. The TARDIS can't speak directly to us. Its intelligence is of a vastly different order to yours, or even mine. It's doing the best it can. Whatever is happening must be very drastic indeed. The cloister bell is a sort of warning signal. It sounds to get my attention. Well, it certainly got mine. Then what? He stared at the panel. A light was blinking steadily. The scanner control. He glanced up at the screen set into the far wall, and it burst into life. Ace jumped and then stared at the face she saw there. It's the brig! She exclaimed. The military bearing, the clipped moustache, the calm and efficient air were all familiar to her. Brigadier Alistair Lethbridge Stewart, once head of the United Nations Intelligence Task Force in Britain. But he looked younger here, and he wore his unit uniform over a much trimmer body than when she had met him. Doctor, the Brigadier said in his precise, measured tones. I need your help, Doctor. Then the picture faded away into nothingness. A cosmic distress signal, she asked him. Did the Brigadier get your number from Interstellar Directory Inquiries? Very funny, the Doctor snapped. He tried fiddling with the controls, but nothing happened. No, there isn't any way that he could have done this, but why... The screen lit up again. This time, it showed a frightened young girl. She had long brown hair and was dressed in a Victorian-looking gown. Doctor, she called. Doctor, where are you? Help me! Help me! The girl glanced over her shoulder and screamed. Then she too vanished. What's going on? Ace demanded. Who was that? Victoria, the Doctor replied tartly. A much quieter and less obstreperous travelling companion than you are. And she didn't ask as many pointless questions. He rapped his knuckles hard on his forehead. Come on, Doctor, think. Again the screen lit up. This time it showed a young man with long, wild hair, dressed in a kilt and wielding a claymore. Doctor, he yelled in thick Scottish tones. I cannot see you. Help me, Doctor. Then, in his turn, he faded out to the white screen. Jamie McCrimmon, the Doctor said hastily, fending off the obvious question. Another person who travelled with me for a while. He snapped his fingers. Got it! Those are all events that happened in the past. The TARDIS is using my own memories, projecting them onto the screen. But why? Ace asked, frustrated. The more she learned, the less she knew. I don't know yet, but there's got to be a reason for it all, he assured her. The TARDIS never acts without a very solid reason. Ace snorted in disbelief. The screen lit up again. This time it showed a young girl of about Ace's age, with an elfin face and thick dark hair. She wore a loose flowing gown and stared out of the screen with a trusting expression on her face. Your temple travels through many times, Doctor, she said. Truly it is a wondrous thing you do. Katerina, he said swiftly. For a moment Ace thought she saw a tear hovering on the edge of his eye, but then it was gone. She's dead now. Temple, Katerina's image repeated. Temple, temple. Then the screen flashed a brilliant white. The blinding expanse was punctuated by a series of coordinates that looked familiar to Ace. Here, she exclaimed. That's the code you always set to get us to Earth. The Doctor nodded. As they watched, the numbers began to dissolve, flowing and vanishing as they did so. Eventually the screen was pure white again. Obviously, it was over. Ace glanced uncertainly at the Doctor. What was all that about? She asked. He turned a haunted face towards her. Well, he said slowly, unless I've very much misinterpreted the warning, I'd say that the TARDIS was telling us that deep in the Earth's past is something that could change the whole course of human history rather drastically. Drastically? How drastically? Drastically as in boom, no more Earth.